Forest activist and conservationist Dylan Pugh has recently been to visit the fire-affected forests in his region of northeast New South Wales. I asked him about the koalas because I wanted to know if they were okay after the fires.
So before the fires, we had found an area of exceptional koala density just south of Casino in a dry spotted gum forest, and forestry was just about to log it. So you don't often find these areas where you look under the trees and you find numerous koala scats, and koala scats were everywhere. We had found what used to be called a koala high use area under forestry terminology, and under the old logging rules as of last year, they had to identify and protect these koala high use areas. So when we first found it, we were excited because we were providing real protection to the koalas. We'd found this area that under the rules they had to protect. So we wrote to the Premier, Gladys Berejiklian, asking her to make sure forestry looked before they logged and protected these high use areas. And what they did was change to these new logging rules, which say they don't need to look for koala high use areas anymore. They don't need to protect them. All they do is they see a koala in a tree, they wait for it to leave before they cut it down. This is like going back to the 80s mentality they used to operate under. And in addition to that, they have to retain 5 small, like 20 centimetre diameter, feed trees per hectare. And that's all. So no need anymore to protect these really rare koala high use areas. But so we started preparing a reserve proposal for 7,000 hectares of state forests. That's Royal Camp, Carwong, Braemar, Nellangowan State Forest, to be protected in perpetuity as koala reserves. Because wherever we looked there, we found evidence of widespread koala usage. It was a really important area with lots of these koala high use areas. And then on the 8th of October, the Busby's fire, which was burning along the southern part of these proposals, the wind changed direction and burnt through virtually the whole of our koala park proposal, the Sandy Creek Koala Park proposal, overnight. So the whole of this important koala habitat was burnt. And look, it was really devastating, you know. Here, we've been working on this since 2012. We'd found the first of these koala high use areas, and we stopped them logging that, another one in 2013, and then these more recent ones in 2019. So it'd been a lot of investment and time and effort to protect these koalas, and suddenly they were burnt out overnight. So we went back in there after the fire, and you know, like I think about 58% of the forest was heavily burnt. And in those heavily burnt areas, even in where we had previously found koala high use areas, there's no evidence of any koalas surviving. So no koala scats, no sightings of koalas. But in the areas that had only been partially burnt, we found evidence of koalas. We saw quite a few. We saw a few, and we found quite a few koala scats over time. So we identified these remnant pockets of surviving koalas, and we informed the government. We told them about it, but they wouldn't do anything for them. And the real trouble was that the fire had gone through and desiccated the canopy of the forest. So, as I said, over half of it had lost all its canopy totally. So there's no food there for koalas at all. In the rest of the forest where the fire had been, it had taken out about half the canopy. So half the canopy had been lost in those areas that weren't too badly burnt. And because of the drought, the trees just stopped growing. So some of the preferred koala feed trees, like red gums and grey gums, just shed their leaves after the fire because they're sin bark trees, and they just shat themselves really. And so really grey box was the only koala feed tree that survived, and a lot of those got burnt out the base and fell over. So a lot of those trees went as well. But anyway, the koalas were in there, but for the next 3 months after the fire, there was no rain. It was still a drought. So the koalas were already stressed by drought before the fire. There's already no moisture or limited moisture in the leaves. The fire exacerbated that, and the trees just weren't growing. There weren't new shoots for the koalas to eat for all these months. So we provided water to one small colony of koalas, and that seemed to have helped. But the other colonies we had found that survived the fire, even though we identified them to the government, received no help at all. And that was devastating. The forest was closed to the public, so we weren't even allowed to go in there. So we had to do it illegally, as it were, to go in and provide sustenance to these poor surviving koalas. But we couldn't do it with all of them, and I couldn't encourage other people to come in. There was more than enough people willing to come out and help, but I couldn't encourage them to do it because I was worried that I'd be liable if anything happened to anyone. And that was shocking, really. So it took 3 months, and then finally we got some rain in late December, and a couple of weeks later the trees started to respond. And thankfully the koala feed trees that have survived the fire were amongst some of the first responders. So they started putting out new shoots, and so by middle of January the recovery was underway, and there were so few koalas left because the koalas, not only had they been apparently killed in the fire, but after the fire they continued to decline. So we were going out there and finding them and monitoring them, and their numbers still continued to decline. I just pray that some of those found refuge elsewhere and will come back now to the forest now that it's recovering, but I'm not sure. And the fires out there were so devastating. They just burnt across the whole landscape. The forest was so dry that it went across gullies, it went through rainforests. It just devastated those forests. The understory was totally devastated, and a lot of the overstory as well. But some koalas hung in there, declined over time, but I'm hoping there's enough of a nexus there to recover their populations. But whereas the forest will recover, is now recovering, and within another month or two, you won't even there'll be plenty of food for koalas. Trouble is, there won't be many koalas left to use that food, and it's going to take them decades to recover. The other area I checked out in detail was Terania Creek and the rainforest burning there. It's as I said before, rainforest was my first love, and I moved to the north coast primarily to be near rainforest, and I lived up Terania Creek Valley for a while, and it was just devastating to go there and see brush box trees that are 1,000 to 2,000 years old, if not older, had been burnt out by the fire. But not only had they been burnt out, often they had strangler figs on them, so the strangler figs were burnt too, and then the whole tree would collapse into the rainforest and continue burning the understory. And so the fire burnt into the rainforest. Then these big old trees, over a period of weeks, burnt out and collapsed into the rainforest, including the figs, causing all this immense damage, and then often set light to the understory again. So areas that had burnt 2 weeks previously re-burnt as they were reignited. And my current assessment is about 160,000 hectares of northeast New South Wales rainforests burnt in the fires. And that's immense. That's about a third of our rainforests burnt in 1 year. And rainforests are not as resilient as eucalypt forests. They're going to go on suffering from that for decades, if not centuries in many cases, and some of those burnt rainforests will probably never recover. And my concern is that when we get another fire, that could be the death knell for huge areas of our rainforest. So, they've been my two areas of focus.